Good evening, everyone. I am Mateo D'Antonio, and welcome to the first edition of interviews from Teo's News Tour. Today I'm here with a man who, early in his youth, rose through the ranks of high school football, had a documentary made about him and two other quarterbacks, and most importantly, is a man of God who seeks Jesus through everything he does, especially when it comes to football. Former Iowa and Kentucky quarterback, Deuce Hogan. Thank you for coming on, Deuce.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Thank you. Deuce, I want to start out this interview by asking you a quick question that's on the mind of many across the country at this time right now. Why did you choose NMSU?
Well, there was a couple of reasons. My decision to come here and the opportunity to come here arose right off the heels of a very specific prayer. I was at Kentucky. I wasn't looking to leave. Got a lot of people I love there, and the woman I love, woman I'm going to marry in January, actually there. And really, I just prayed a very specific prayer, and that was, Lord, if I'm supposed to go somewhere else, you got to blow the doors down, like make it undeniable. And shortly after, this opportunity arose, and they basically said, hey, you're going to be our guy, and we got a bunch of returning starters, and we're kind of on a hot streak. Coach Kill and that staff had done a great job kind of flipping things, and so it was just kind of like I prayed that prayer, and literally I woke up the next morning, and this opportunity arose, and I thought, all right, Lord, like, I hear you, and when he says go, I'll go.
That's powerful, man. Have there been any times in your life that you maybe have had a call and like kind of denied it at first and just said, well, I don't know if this is the way you want me to go, God, even though it's kind of obvious?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something, when I think about it, it's about how closely can you balance being a man of action, but also having a heart posture of submission. For me, it's like I always want to go. I want to make things happen, but at the same time, I don't want to go without asking God where. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I've kind of had to learn how to balance those, and definitely have taken wrong steps at times. But the beautiful thing about a relationship with Jesus is that he will, the Bible says he'll be a lamp to your feet. And all that is enough light to take the next right step. So for me, it's like, even if I get off course, if I'm seeking in the way I should, one step at a time will kind of get me back on track. And so, like, if you had asked me how I thought things would go through these years of college, I would have been way off. But, if I hadn't ended up in Lexington, I wouldn't have met my wife.
Right.
And it's just like, you can't really script it as much as you can just try to take the next right step.
Wow. You said in high school that great teams are player-driven. And so I just wanted to ask you that you, as kind of one of the leaders of this Aggies football team, how are you going to embody that this year? Or do you still believe that to be true?
Yeah, I think that great teams are always player-driven. I think that, coaches can start to build a culture, and they can establish, what they believe to be right. But at some point, the guys got to take it over. And with every great team, there comes a time in which the team takes it over, and they are the standard setters, and they are the form of accountability. And so I definitely believe that. And for me personally, all I've tried to do since I showed up in January was earn the right to lead. I think leadership is something that's earned by the way that you perform and by the way that you work. And so for me personally, it's just trying to show up and be the same every day, work as hard as I can, and be a kind of a pillar of stability for the team. And that opportunities to lead will present themselves.
Absolutely. How has your faith in Christ impacted the way you play, both in your youth and now being in one of the highest ranks in America?
Well, impacted the way I play. It's an interesting thing because I haven't played a lot. I've taken a lot of snaps and gone to a lot of practices, sat in a lot of meetings, watched a lot of tape, and haven't got to play a whole lot. And, I'm hoping and praying that will change. I believe it will. But I would change that question and say, how has it affected the way that I've prepared?
Yeah.
I was really challenged with that early in my career. Like, if I'm not seeing the fruits of my labor right now, will it change the way that I prepare? Mm-hmm. And I've had some really awesome coaches and older guys around me, veterans in the locker room, that have said, hey, look, like, if you believe that you are called to be here, if you believe that you're called to play, then you owe it to God and yourself and the people around you to prepare to the highest level. So I think for me, my relationship with God with regards to the way that I play slash prepare has served as a sense of accountability, even if I'm not playing on Saturdays. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If I believe that I'm called to be in a certain place or called to be doing a certain thing, then I cannot kind of back away when things aren't going my way.
Wow.
It's also called to give my best when you don't always see the fruits of your labor immediately. So for me, it's been I feel like the Lord and my relationship with Jesus has been a beacon of like accountability and constant calling.
That's incredible, Deuce. Thank you so much. And I mean, that's so profound, because I mean, even I played football, and that was one of my struggles. Like, sometimes whenever things either didn't go my way or just things like that, I always kind of just like, oh man, well, maybe it's just not the route that I was meant to be on. And I mean, I can totally understand that. So there's definitely two perspectives here of, where that leads you, right? Football was one of my passions and things like that all throughout high school and even out through college. I was always wanting to play, but I never had enough of a drive because every time I got kind of shot down, I would always stay down. Yeah. And so, kind of you can understand the dynamic here of this is where you get if maybe you don't listen to that call versus what can happen when you do listen to that call.
One thing that I will say is that when you're trying to find your calling, your calling doesn't change if things aren't going right.
Absolutely.
And that's something that every person has to kind of ask themselves, like, well, I believe I'm called here, and then it starts to go wrong or not how you planned it, and then you start to question, is that what I heard from God? First of all, you have to listen with intent so that you don't miss your calling, right? But if you listen intentionally and believe that that's where the Lord wants you, just when things go south, it doesn't mean that the Lord's calling is changing. And that's something that I had to hear because I've been at 3 different universities and moved all over the country. And also, I would encourage people to do this. If you're in a place where you feel like you're called to be and doing something that you believe you're supposed to do, the fruit might not look like what you thought it was going to look like, but there is fruit. Like, I've had the opportunity to start Bible studies at 3 universities. I've met guys at every school that will be in my wedding in January. And like the amount of prayers and conversations, and there's been fruit. It hasn't always been what I thought it was going to look like, but there is fruit. And I would encourage anybody that's feels like they're trying to pursue their calling, but they're not seeing the immediate rewards of it or what they thought it would look like. I would say look for fruit in other places because if you're sent somewhere, there will be good results. You know what I'm saying?
Do you have any advice for young athletes and how they can embody Jesus through their sport?
Yeah, I thought about this question when you sent it to me, and this is kind of what I settled on. One thing I really struggled with was feeling like I was supposed to be the picture of Jesus for people while simultaneously being a killer competitor. I really struggled with that. That was a battle that I really wrestled with. How can I be a killer and a fierce competitor and also the epitome of love and grace? And that's something I really wrestled with. And I was studying the Bible and really trying to find answers, asking people that are wise around me. And my dad, Kris Hogan, he's got an awesome podcast. It's called Atomic Masculinity, if y'all want to check it out. He said Jesus was a competitor and Jesus was passionate. Now, if you let your competitive spirit change your character, that's when it becomes detrimental. But for young athletes that are trying to embody Jesus with the way that they perform and compete, you can be graceful and loving, be in moral upstanding, have a clean mouth while also being fiery passionate. Those can coexist. And so I encourage y'all to try to do both. That's kind of what I would say as my piece of advice.
Man, that's awesome, Deuce. Thank you so much. And I have one last question for you. And I understand that you're a Texas kid.
Here we go.
Oh yeah, here we go. I gave him some answers to be prepared with, but this one is total curveball. Okay. Do you like Andy's or Calichi's better?
Andy's, and it's not close.
Oh.
I know it's gonna offend some people. Andy's is pretty top tier. It's also nostalgic. Like when we would win games Friday nights in Texas, we'd go to Whataburger and Andy's. So that's what we did. So
that's amazing. And just real quick, while we have the time, I want to tell you maybe just if it can inspire someone, the story of how I met you, because you only got to see like 10% of the picture of whenever I first met you. So I saw that you were coming here, and I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. Like we've got a star quarterback, and I'm like, this is gonna be cool. And so after I really did my cold hard research one night, I was really just praying that night after this, and I literally wrote down all these questions or some of these questions like that night. So I've had them ready for like weeks, and I was just like, Lord, if there's some way I want to be able to get an interview with this quarterback. And so the home opener against SEMO, I came and I know we'd won. It was electric, and then all my friends and family went home, and next thing you know, the lights went dark, and I looked up, and all of a sudden there's fireworks, right? So I was just like so emotional. I was fired up. I'm like, man, I miss this Aggies football, and now I have this opportunity to maybe like run into him, right? I was like, maybe I could talk to him, whatever. I could like interview this guy. And so I went up to like the top of the stands after the game, and I was like, man, Lord, like if it is in your will, please just like allow me just some opportunity. And so I'm seeing some SEMO players and some NMSU players kind of walking around. I'm like, oh man, like what's going on here? And I was like they're out of the locker room. I'm like, wait, maybe what if, And so I get on my phone for a few minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, this is dumb. Like, what am I doing, right? And then the next thing you know, I look down at my phone, I look up, and there's that cowboy hat that's so well known. I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened, right? As I'm like starting to walk by, all I hear is, we need a group photo. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can take the photo. And so, just to anyone out there listening, the Lord provides opportunities no matter what. I thought there was no way that this interview would even ever happen. And just being here is an absolute blessing and, just purely, in my opinion, sent by God. And so I'm so thankful to you, Deuce, and to New Mexico State football for allowing us to be out here to record, and just, for you being the man of God that you are, and just to the Lord, obviously, for providing this interview for us. So thank you so much for everything, Deuce. I really appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me. Listen, if you are listening, like, subscribe, follow.
Come on.
You'll need to listen to this podcast. Also, this podcast, Atomic Masculinity, and the shirt I'm wearing, it's a brand called Built by God, and this brand is created and owned by an Aggie football player. His name is Ortiz. He's on fire for Jesus. He's totally on mission. So if y'all go to builtbygod.com, y'all can get all the merchandise.
All the links in bio and on the top right of your screen, wherever that may be. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for listening to this first episode of Teo's News Tour. Thank you.